everyone, my name is Samantha and welcome to my YouTube channel Sewing in Switzerland. So today I thought we'd do another skill share just on the kind of build up towards the Christmas season, and we'll do some sew alongs and then we'll get some kind of Christmassy goodness going on. So I wanted to show you the quickest and easiest way to do gathers, and that's using your sewing machine. So I've got this piece of pink linen actually here, and what we're going to do is we're going to run 3 lines of running stitches along the top piece here to create our gathers. So I'm going to take you to the machine and show you how to do that. So this method works best with lightweight fabrics. So think cottons, viscose, linens, anything that's got a little bit of a drape to it. Not too heavyweight. If you've got something like a denim, something like this, you might have to, and you want to run gathers through it, you might have to do an alternate method. And I've also got a canvas here that would have the same situation. So it's very, very thick. It doesn't have a lot of drape, it doesn't have a lot of movement, it's very stiff. So for this one, you'd want to do the dental floss method. Now, if you're not familiar using dental floss to create gathers on a thicker fabric, so also like a taffeta or an organza, something that's quite plasticky and sticky and doesn't have that kind of range of movement that a lighter weight fabric does. So if you're kind of thinking, I want to do something on a heavier weight fabric, let me know in the comments, and what I'll do is I'll create the dental floss method, which is where you use dental floss essentially to create your gathers. It's very fun, very cool, but it does work best on thicker or heavier weight fabrics. So we're going to do the standard running stitch along the tops here to create our gathering. That's the method that we're going to take today. So I will meet you at the machine and I'll show you what stitch length to create and how we're going to run those lines to create those gathers at the machine. So see you there. So the first thing we're going to need to do at the machine is alter our stitch length and our stitch width. So this is the standard stitch width and stitch length, 3.5 and 2.5 on my Singer machine. But we're going to want to increase that to get the longest stitch length and the longest width we can. So you're just going to want to keep increasing that. There we go, until it doesn't go anymore. So on my machine, that's 6.5 and a 4.8. So you want the longest of everything, essentially. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take it back to the machine here, and we're going to run 1 line of stitches at the top here, so where you want your gathers to be. Now with your threads at the back there, you just want to pull them so they're nice and long. We want nice long threads for this. So I'm just going to line it up at the top of the machine, and obviously depending on the project that you're doing, it will have the allotted seam allowance on there. So don't worry if your stitches go over that seam allowance that you've been allocated on the pattern, which they will do. But what we will do with our gathering stitches down the line is we will unpick them. So for now, don't worry about them being outside of that seam allowance. So I've got the fabric lined up. I've got a really long stitch length and stitch width going on, and I'm just going to run those stitches. So just bear with me, we'll do it together so you can see how that fabric starts to gather. And it's worth noting here, do not back tack. No back tacks. No back tacks at the end, no back tacks at the beginning. You just want to go straight through. We get to the end now, we're just going to come straight off the end, going to lift up the presser foot, and we're going to pull our threads so that they're super long, and then you just want to trim your threads there. And there we go. So this is our first line of gathering stitches. So you can see where that's pulled that in really nicely. And you might be thinking, well, maybe we can just stop here. You don't want to. We're going to actually put 3 lines of gathering stitches along the top here, because they break very, very easily. So if you're doing your gathering stitches and you've only got 1 line of stitching and you're pinning it to your bodice and you're, you know, there we go, you're altering your stitches there, making sure that the gather's all even and lovely, they can snap so easily, and then you'd be without your gathers. Your gathers would just straighten out as soon as the thread snaps. So if you put a second line in, then that kind of backs up the first line. So you've got that security that if one snaps, the second one is still good. But I like to add a third because, you know, 3 is better than 2. And you want to be really safe than sorry, because then you'll just have to unpick it and start from the beginning again. So 3 is the kind of the standard that everybody seems to use, and it's a good one. So this one, we're going to line up our fabric again on the machine. So you just want to make sure that the long thread tails that you've left are out the way, because you're going to use those to manipulate the actual gathers there. That's going to be what you kind of tug on to line up your gathers. So I like to line up the edge of my presser foot with the threads that I've made there. The first line of stitching lines up, but again, you can go a little bit smaller, but you do want to make sure that your line of stitching that you're making now does not touch the original line, because if that crosses over or that touches that will break the ability to create the gathers. Okay, you've like locked that piece in then, so you won't be able to do the gathering because your thread will not be able to pull that way along. So you just want to make sure that the second row of stitches never touches the first or the third row. So we're just going to go along as we did before. Again, remember, no back tacking. And the other thing to get your gathers really super even is you don't want your fabric to drag. So you don't want to be making the stitches as the fabric's over here like this. You want the fabric to be pointing the direction to the side of your machine. So you want to make sure that the fabric isn't pulling towards you. You want it to be lying nice and smooth, nice and flat, kind of to the side of your machine. And again, watch out for your threads at the end there, so you just want to make sure that you're not running over them. And again, no back tack, just come straight off, and you want to make your threads nice and long again. So this is what our second line of gathers looks like. So you can see it's really kind of getting that lovely gathered technique now, and it's just kind of coming together by itself, which with a lighter weight fabric is perfectly normal. So again, we're just going to run our final layer of threads, our final row of stitching. So again, I just line up that edge with the thread, the previous row of stitching. And again, at this point, don't worry too much about your seam allowance. So again, no back tacks, we're just going to run straight down. Okay, so you can see here we've got our 3 rows of gathering stitches, and honestly it's kind of gathered that in really lovely, and it's looking pretty even actually. You know, I always say less manipulation is the best when it comes to gathers, because they will try and, you know, naturally gather themselves. So if you want to even up your gathers and you need to make your gathered piece much smaller, if you're, say, attaching it to a bodice and that needs to be half the size, what you would need to do is we are just going to grab one of the pieces of thread from one of the lines. So you don't want to grab both. If you're pulling both, nothing's going to happen. So you just want one thread from one row of stitching. And it does get quite fiddly. And then you're just going to tug on it ever so gently. So you can see that's really pulled those gathers in there. And then you're just going to, with your other hand, just run with a little bit of pressure along those gathers there. And you can see how they're kind of moving along with that slight bit of pressure. And then you can do it again. Pull that along. So this thread will get considerably longer. And it doesn't matter if you're using the top thread or the middle thread or the bottom thread to make your gathers. You can use any one of them, it doesn't matter. So you can see how that shape has almost already halved in size. And we've got this really tight gathering along here at the moment. So we're just going to pull that along to even it out. And I don't recommend doing all your gather pulls on one side either. So then you're going to switch to the other side of the fabric, and grab one of your threads. Again, this can be super fiddly. Oh goodness, it does need a hot second. But you want to kind of be pulling on them ever so gently because they can snap, and they can, which is why you've got your 3 lines really. So I just tend to wrap it around my finger just to keep that kind of thread secure. And there we go, you just want to pull your gathers along. So you want to do both sides so that you end up with like even gathers and you don't just end up with this kind of bulky bit here in the middle. And again, this kind of method is like Marmite. Some people love gathers and they say, oh yeah, it's really relaxing, really soothing to do. You know, you can take your gathers, sit on the sofa, put the telly on and just kind of fiddle with them. But other people absolutely hate them. So it really is a Marmite situation. So I'm just going to pull on the gathers here a little bit. And you can essentially just kind of keep going with it. And in most cases, what you'll have is you'll have your bodice piece here and you'll have your gathered, normally your gathered skirt here. So you'll want your gathers to be the same length as the bodice piece because that will be what you're matching up against. So I'm just going to use a piece of fabric to show how you would pin your bodice to the gathers here and then how you would sew them along. And also you can see, just as a final note on creating the gathers, you can see I've used an alternate thread color to the color of the fabric. Make your gathers in a different color with the thread so that you can really see where those stitches are. If you're doing it in the same, and then when it comes to the unpicking stage where we want to unpick the gathers, what you'll find is you will maybe accidentally unpick the correct line of stitching that holds the bodice to it. So you want to make sure that they're really easily identifiable. So once you're happy with your gathers and with how that looks, you're going to grab your bodice piece. So I'll just grab that and I'll meet you back here. Okay, so I've collected the piece that I want to stitch the gathered stitch piece to. So this piece underneath of pink linen here, you're just going to have to imagine that there's a bodice piece here, okay? So I've got my pink piece and I'm going to pin it now to my imaginary bodice. So you want to make sure that your gathers are facing up towards you because we're going to want to keep them facing upwards when we put them on the machine so that we can manipulate it as we go. So you're just going to grab your pins, you're going to line up, say, your bodice piece with your gathered piece here, and you're just going to work your way along popping the pins in. So again, as you go, you can kind of just make sure that those gathers are just kind of pointing downwards. You want them to kind of be flowing nice and straight. So you don't want them kind of going this way. You don't want them angled. And you just want to pop your pins in as you go. You don't need to massively overpin. But again, if you're new to gathers, just kind of do what makes you comfortable. If you feel comfortable sticking like 12,000 pins in, you go right ahead. It's not going to make any difference. Unless your fabric does mark with pins, in which case, you know, approach with caution. So here we go. Nearly at the end there. Again, you just want to make sure that they're all pointing in the right direction. And this isn't one of those situations, those sewing situations where you do it and you think, oh crikey, you know, if it goes wrong, it's you know, done for. It's not. You can just unpick that section that you're not happy with and give it another go. There's so many opportunities with sewing to rectify any mistakes or any kind of little niggles that you're not happy with. They can easily be fixed or problem solved. So don't kind of think, oh gosh, I only have one shot at this, because you don't. You've got loads. You're fine. Right, lovely. So I'm just going to hold that up so you can kind of see how all of the gathers point in one direction. So they're all pointing downwards. And that's kind of key to getting nice, even gathers, to be honest. So you can see how I'm just kind of running my thumb across the top of the gathers here. Just kind of, it just gives that nice kind of even finish. It just kind of really evens them all out. There we go. It's looking pretty good. And you can see this is what the underside looks like here with what would be your bodice piece, for example. Okay, so we're going to pop it under the machine now, but I do just want to make sure that you've reset your panel so that your stitch length and your stitch width is no longer at the longest point. So mine has a stitch width of 3.5 and a stitch length of 2.5. So that's kind of just this factory standard on a Singer Confidence, and it's pretty good. So yeah, make sure that you no longer have the longest thread length. And then what I've gone ahead and done is I've changed the color of my thread. So you'll be able to see the difference between the gathering thread and also the normal kind of stitch thread. You'll want to use a color that matches the project that you're working on. So for instance, I would ordinarily use a pink thread for this, but for contrast, so you can see kind of how it's going to look, I'm using the white thread. Okay, so you just want to line it up on your machine, and this is where you would use the standard seam allowance that your project has. So that might be, you know, 5/8, it might be half, I don't know. I'm just going to go with the standard half. So there we go, it's all lined up. We've got the gathers facing up towards us, we've got our pins, and what you want to do as you start sewing is just make sure that those gathers are pointing away from the machine, so they're pointing towards the left hand side. And what we're going to do is we're just going to pop a little stitch in here, and then we're going to do a quick back stitch as well, just to secure that. So you just want to remove the pins as you go. And you can see, there we go, where it's kind of picking up the gathers. worry too much if you've got a little bit of bunching going on at the top here. That's not too much of a worry. I'm just going to move that slightly so the fabric's out of the way. Again, you don't want the fabric tilting towards you. You don't want it on your lap. You want it to the side of the machine so that it's not dragging or pulling towards you. With the gathers, I will say, as you can see here, I've got a little lip, a little bit of bulk popping out. So I'm just going to lower the needle there and pop the presser foot up. And I'm just going to little nudge with the finger there and then lower the presser foot back down. Remove that needle. And away you go. So it's not just kind of dragging and catching and then pulling everything out of alignment towards you. So if you get any kind of bunching or any kind of lips underneath your presser foot, you just want to lower the needle, lift the presser foot, and just kind of give it a little bit of a shimmy back under. But I mean a little bit of bunching here. I wouldn't worry about that. That'll kind of just line up nicely as you stitch, you see? And this is one of those skills that you will get better at over time. Your first bit of gathering, you're likely to have uneven gathers. Maybe your thread will break. It's totally normal. It's one of those skills that just kind of come to you the more you do it. So just practice, practice, practice. But again, the most important thing, if you take from this video, it's that your gathers point away from the machine there. So they're pointing in the direction that you want them to be in. You know, because if you're stitching and it's pulling this way, when we're finished, the gathers will sit that way. So you just want to make sure that everything's in alignment. You can see I've got one of these lips again, just a little bit extra fabric. So I'm just going to lower that needle, pop the presser foot, just shimmy it back under. Looking good. Delicious. So again, you want a back tack at the end here. And just cut your threads as normal. And this is what it will look like. So you can see it looks a bit jumbled. There's a lot going on. It's very overwhelming. So I'm going to flip it to the right side. And then we're going to lift it up. Ta-da! This is your bodice piece, your imaginary bodice piece with your gathering stitches. So now you're thinking, Sam, you're crazy. There's loads of stitch lines. What on earth do we do? So you're going to want to grab your, oh gosh, there's a needle. You're going to want to grab your stitch unpicker, your seam ripper, whatever you want to call it, the little doodah with the little needle and the knobble there. And you're going to want to unpick these lovely blue stitch lines that we've got here. So you can see, and I'm just going to do it from the right side of the fabric, just so you can see how that kind of pans out. So you want to be super careful that you're not catching the fabric and making any holes at this stage. And then we're just going to remove those lines of stitching with our seam ripper. And this is usually the bit everybody hates, but I find it quite soothing. You can put something on Netflix or Disney Plus and just kind of chill out while you're unpicking. But it can be, it is quite fiddly. So again, if you have any like mobility issues or motor issues with your hands, this can be quite, not painful, but you know, it is very repetitive and your hands can get sore from being in the same position. So you might want to take a few breaks as well. So I'm just unpicking that first bit. I'm just going to go off camera in a second just to unpick the rest because it might take me 20 minutes or so. So you can kind of see where we're going with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove these visible lines here with my seam ripper, and I will meet you back here shortly once I've removed those lines, okay? Okay, so it is 1,000 years later. I've unpicked the gathering stitches from the bottom here, so you can see where we've got that really nice gathered finish now. So you have to imagine that this piece is the bodice piece, and then also is the skirt piece, and you can see we've got that lovely gathered movement. They're looking pretty even, pretty good. So you're going to want to go to your iron now and just give it a bit of a steamy press, but do not over press the gathers. So I'm talking like 1-2 seconds max of steam on those gathers, just to really give it that kind of nice crisp finish. But don't push too hard or you'll flatten the gathers. If you want to finish the seam allowance here that we've got, so this is the wrong side now, you can either use pinking shears and just kind of cut across that seam allowance there, and the pinking shears will stop it from fraying. If you have an overlocker, just go ahead and overlock that, and that'll keep it all nice and secure, and you won't kind of get any fraying or unraveling there. And that is how we do our gathers. So if this video, the Skillshare, has been helpful to you, do please like and subscribe to my channel. Do please feel free to leave me a comment if there's anything that's not quite clear, or any kind of thing you would like help with, or if you would like the dental floss gather method tutorial as well, do please let me know. And I will see you all very, very soon. Thanks so much. Bye.